Hello. Welcome to another battleship inspection in World of Warships. And we are looking at the last of the Tier 10 tech trees, and it is the Conqueror. Right off the bat, I'm not the biggest fan of playing the Conqueror, but I do think that it is still a very relevant and useful and some honestly, to be honest, somewhat unique battleship still. And I think that typically the HE spam, the perma brain damaged HE spam of the Conqueror kind of sucks up all the oxygen in the discussion of why play it. And typically the suggested reason to play this thing is well, you can just spam HE and farm a ton of damage. That's true. It does farm damage quite well. However, I am going to posit a perhaps controversial but factually correct opinion, which is that if your goal is to play a battleship that farms a huge amount of damage via HE spam only, this is just kind of not the best one in the game. Uh, the Bungo's better at this. The Rhode Island is better at this. The Mecklenburg is better at this. The Montana, if HE spam only is what you play on Montana, is actually better than this. And this is because all of these ships have vastly improved accuracy, and they only suffer a little bit in the HEDPM uh, and the fire starting capacity. So on paper, right? On paper, Conqueror still has, I believe, the highest HEDPM in the game of all the Tier 10 battleships. But the problem is, it's not that much higher than something like Rhode Island. In fact, it's barely higher. Rhode Island has such massively improved accuracy over the Conqueror that the average Rhode Island salvo is legitimately as good, sometimes better, as the average Conqueror salvo. Now, you just see there, we hit this guy for a double fire and almost 17,000 damage. Every now and then, those salvos do still happen. That is a pretty rare salvo. I would say in the 18 to 20 kilometer range, you're typically pretty pleased with 5 to 6 shells hitting the target. And there you see 4, right? So really what is kind of helping Conqueror a lot is, in theory, now we're going to talk about theory and then reality. In theory, your guns have a ton of pen, right? You get quarter pen, so you have 105 millimeters of HE pen, right? Now, unequivocally, this does give you a giant advantage against ultralight cruisers. Things like Minotaur, Genan, the like. You consider them with HE. Really cool. I mean, the Germans can do that too. They just don't have quite the Alpha Strike, right? Um, no Citadel is very cool. But the problem with the high HE pen is against large targets like battleship and cruisers. I want you to think of the situations where this HE pen would matter, right? So if you're thinking of all of the tier 10 battleships, kind of the standard pen, it's like the really low caliber ones like Rhode Island, they get 59 millimeter pen. Okay, well, you have a clear advantage over that against like Kremlin decks, right? Um, then like the 380s, they get like low 60s pen. The 406s get high 60s. So I want you to think about this ship compared to all of the battleships. They virtually all pen 60 plus millimeters of armor, right? In fact, I think the only tier 10 BB that doesn't pen 60 would be Rhode Island at 59 because it has the 356 millimeter guns. What battleship in this game are you shooting where crossing a threshold beyond 60 millimeters, but but not more than 105 would matter? And I'm gonna like kind of humbly say like basically none of that would matter. The only thing that even really like comes to mind would be the upper belt on the Colombo is 70, right? So Conqueror pens that. Now, I mean, to be fair, all of the ships with 457s also pen that, right? All the ships with even 420s, I think, pen that. Even like Libertad. So I would argue that against basically 99% of ships that you shoot at, having this extra pen on the guns doesn't like effectively do anything for you. Um, so it's obviously coming in very nice against the ultralight cruisers that have the 70 to um, it's the 70 to 103. I think Minotaur Citadel Belt is 102, 103, something like that. So all of those ships that you have a noticeable advantage, but the reality is, on most of them, you're still better off shooting armor piercing at them anyway. If you have the time to switch. So kind of just a very, in my mind, like dubious ability that this thing has. It's like, as long as you're penning 60, you're penning every battleship deck in the game except fucking Loria, because Loria has like retarded platings on it, right? So I don't really think you're gaining a whole lot out of the Conqueror with the pen. Uh, Now, like, to repeat myself, like I said, the raw HE DPM is still the highest in the game. However, it's very important to factor in effective DPM, right? These guns have basically the same accuracy as GK, which is not, to put it lightly, renowned for its accuracy. And because of how few shells you hit in your average Conqueror salvo, like you see here, this guy's very close range, perfectly nose in, and we can only really hit half our shells on him. And I would say that's fairly typical. Like a nose in battleship at 10 kilometers, I'd say it's fairly typical to only hit 6 to 7 shells on them. Right? Now, if that's something like a Rhode Island, a Mecklenburg, a Montana, we're kind of hitting like guaranteed 2/3 plus of our salvo on that guy, right? And that is, of course, the difference. You can't just pull up ship tool. I see this all the time on the subreddit, is people just like pull up ship tool and they're like, well, actually, this ship has more damage output than this ship. It's like, yes, but like, does that matter if one ship hits half its salvo and the other ship hits 2/3 of its salvo every shot, right? I mean, like, we talked about this in the Gdansk review, how it effectively has the highest tier 10 fires per minute, because yes, it's not theoretically as high as something like a Vampire 2, but you don't really miss ever because you have railgun shell arcs, right? And kind of the same philosophy is happening with the Conqueror. The shells are very slow, very mediocre dispersion. And then, really what you have going for you is just the Alpha Strike, right? They do 7,200. Now, comparing these HE shells to Bungo, that basically does the same amount of damage. A Bungo HE salvo with the spotter plane up is going to hit basically 10 out of 10 shells, right? So you're kind of effectively always going to average like significantly more damage from a Bungo salvo than a Conqueror salvo. Again, something like Rhode Island, you're probably going to average similar amounts of damage. Montana, similar amounts of damage and fires. Mecklenburg, something like that, a bit less damage, but equally consistent fire starting. And so this is kind of rounding up the discussion on the guns. The AP is fine. It's kind of like having Montana AP that has short fuse. Now, short fuse is both a gift and a curse. I think people kind of focus on, oh, well, you don't overpen cruisers a lot, which is kind of a fundamental misunderstanding most of the time of how pens and overpens happen. And then there are many, many situations where Montana can citadel things at certain angles and ranges that these guns can't because the shell fuse too fast, right? Especially when you're hitting water first on people. It's a big downside. So I don't think having short fuse shells on the Conqueror is any kind of advantage really at all. I know a lot of people consider it an advantage, but what I consider the true relevance of the Conqueror, now that we've kind of summed up shitting on the gun, not shitting on the guns, the HE damage output is excellent. It's just that like there are multiple other battleships in tier 10 that are every bit as capable of HE spamming as Conqueror. The unique feature that this thing has is the heal, and it is not just the fact that it's a super heal on paper, right? Because there are many, many, many ships that have a super heal, you might say on paper, right? What I mean by that is we're talking about pair percent and sit pair, and sit repair, right? Like there are many ships that have a gigantic amount that they can heal, right? Like Vincent can heal a ton of its HP back because it has a super heal, but Vincent's super heal only heals 60% of penetration damage. Conqueror's super heal heals 75%, right? It is the most efficient penetration repair heal in the game. Full stop. As long as you are not taking citadels and you are not taking torpedoes, the Conqueror heals more damage than every other ship in the game. It just does. It still does. And you can get crazy specs on this thing. Improved repair party readiness made the Conqueror go from a cockroach to a cockroach plus. The thing is basically unkillable. Uh, this day and age with improved repair party readiness. You see here we've tanked 2.1 million potential. What's the heal looking like? Yeah, 62 second heal on a heal that is healing with this spec. I'm actually running a bit of a cringe tank spec. So my super heals are worth about 48,000 repair healing, and yeah, getting those back in 60 seconds, super fucking balanced. Improved repair party readiness is like probably the most overpowered skill right now in the game, and battleships, of course, can take it. It's just kind of obscenely overpowered because basically any game in any battleship where you're using your base healing, you're going to get to that extra heal. And that is kind of like the problem with it. And then even if you don't get to that extra heal, if you put yourself in bad situations and take burst fire against you, then it doesn't really matter if you don't get to the extra heal. Like let's assume I never utilize that extra heal on my Conqueror this game. Like it doesn't fucking matter because I'm never gonna die. Like I have a 60-second fucking heal now. Like I could go run at, 3 different ships and I would just never fucking die to them, right? I mean the game's over, right? The game's over. We're at 220,000 damage fairly effortlessly. But I do think that you're not playing Conqueror to HE spam. Because here's the reality. If I could have this hull and this healing on the Montana, but keep Montana's guns, like I would make that trade in a heartbeat. Like I would much, much, much rather have significantly more, noticeably more accurate guns on Montana and just keep Conqueror's gimmick, right? So like realistically, if I had to give up one, if I had to give up this cracked HE or give up Conqueror's, cracked healing ability, like I'm 100% giving up the HE, just full stop. I mean, there's is not like that like really the only thing truly special about it is the alpha damage. I mean, uh, the alpha damage in the pen, it's like yes, the fire starting is above average for the caliber, but considering how few shells you hit compared to something like a Montana, the extra fire starting, the extra alpha on the HE is legitimately whatever. It's legitimately a whatever ability. I mean, yes, every now and then unicorn salvos happen. Kind of like with old Columbo, right? Before Columbo got all its crazy buffs, how like you kind of averaged maybe 6 hits on Columbo, but then every now and then you would hit like 12 shells, like 1 in 10 salvos. You would nuke somebody, right? Which you which you now just do every time. But that's kind of the same thing as Conqueror. Like generally speaking, your average HE salvo is 7 to 10,000 damage in one fire. That's the average Rhode Island, Mecklenburg, and Montana salvo. I mean, I don't know what to fucking tell you, man. Like, it's not that ridiculous. Like, if you right now go in a lobby, load up your Montana with a normal Montana build, and you just never touch the 2 key and you spam HE only, like, you're gonna farm the same kind of damage that Conqueror farms. You just are. Now as a caveat to this, and this is going to Conqueror's true ability, which is the tanking in my mind, is that when you play right in people's mouths, like inside of 15 kilometers, that is when the Conqueror, because the lack of accuracy doesn't really, matter that much at that kind of point blank range. Um, like to me, that is the way to play Conqueror. The way to play Conqueror is 14 to 18 kilometers, very close to people, where your bad dispersion doesn't matter, and then your extra alpha strike on the HE actually does matter. That's what I'm typically trying to do in the Conqueror. Unfortunately, like you saw earlier in this game where I pushed middle and I, just parked, like, yeah, I let the, Ohio take 40k off of me. It's fine. But the problem is, like, again, like this ship's true gimmick is the healing. Like that's the to my mind, undeniably the true gimmick that makes Conqueror relevant is the healing. So if you're not trying to make use of the healing, right, consciously putting yourself in a position to make use of the crazy healing where you just like basically cannot die, right? I mean, think about like this, this spec I'm running, 48,000 a heal, right? So that's covering a 60k strike from a battleship. So you think about, as long as you're not taking citadels, how long is it going to take like a Montana in a 1v1 to do 60,000 damage to you, right? It's probably going to take him 4 salvos, so let's call it 1.5 to 2 full minutes, and then in like 20 something seconds, you heal back 48,000 of the 60k he just did to you. So he gets you down to like 22k health. You heal back to 70,000. And then, like, by the time he can even come close to doing enough damage for you to heal again, the heal is back. So, like, this is kind of the point of the Conqueror is like against one or two ships, it basically just can never die. They have to burn through like 3 or 4 heals to kill this thing, which takes many minutes. And to me, that is the true value of the Conqueror suite of gimmicks. Yes, it has the higher than average fire chance, higher than average alpha HE, undeniably. But again, considering the mediocre accuracy and other ships having close to as good raw HE output, I would say effectively Conqueror is not special in its HE damage output. I truly believe that it's not special. You can play other normally AP focused ships with HE and basically just do the same kind of damage. It's the healing that's special. And so the idea is always trying to put yourself in a situation to utilize the healing gimmick. Now, in the start of the second replay, we can kind of talk about what you're like looking for matchmaker wise. There basically are kind of just two things that are a problem in Conqueror, like a consistent problem, right? I mean, yes, you could bot out like a retard and take a 40k Citadel salvo and totally cuck your healing. That's possible, but the biggest problem is uh, hitting torpedoes from destroyers and then armor, AP bombs from CVs that can Citadel like Richtofen, and then carriers with good torps. So you see here, we have an Essex, they have an Akimov. I would argue in Conqueror, Nakimov is like almost an ideal battleship to be against because Nakimov accomplishes like 90% of its damage output via fires and HE penetration, and you don't give a fuck about either of those two things in the Conqueror. And the torpedoes on the Nakimov are extremely slow. They're pretty easy to not get smashed by. Whereas something like the Essex, right? Like the Essex on our team, if I'm alone, an Essex could very, very easily come drop me for 40,000 unhealable damage with its torpedoes because its torpedoes are ridiculous, right? So that's kind of what you need to keep in mind is like if their CV has like Richtofen is a nightmare for this thing because it's probably gonna like double drop you with torps for 15k, right? And then it's gonna AP bomb you and get citadels on you and totally cuck your healing, right? Because you don't have any kind of improved citadel repair in the Conqueror, right? You just have 10% sit repair like most other battleships have. So as long as you're not eating carrier torps or destroyer torps, you're pretty much good to go. It doesn't like carriers don't really affect this thing. I would argue that the majority of CVs, Conqueror's quite immune to carriers because you just have so much healing, right? That's really what it comes down to. Like you see here, we have a 48,000 HP heal because I'm taking consumables module instead of concealment module because I don't like value the concealment on Conqueror at all. Like to be perfectly honest with you, like this is kind of like the one ship I think is like as a battleship of like objectively there's no point to concealment on it. Um, and then it's the one probably the one battleship where I think like Furious is kind of like the Furious build is maybe not objectively correct, but very close to just objectively correct. Because of the healing, like that's just really what it comes down to. Even over Vincent, right? The healing is much improved over Vincent, both the reload on the heal and the efficiency of the heal. I'm just gonna not repair the rudder here and just drift past these torpedoes. But this is kind of what I'm trying to play in the Conqueror. I'm trying to play middle typically because I want to get shot at, right? Like I kind of mentioned this in multiple other videos that getting shot at is the point, but I would say like Conqueror is the embodiment of impacting the game by taking damage because it's just so healable, right? Like if I get hit for 80,000 damage and I go all the way down to 2,000 damage, right? I will use a full efficiency heal to get back up to 50k, and then I will use another heal to get back up to like 70,000 plus damage, right? Because all the fire damage is healable, and then 3 out of 4 of the pen damage is healable. So, to me, if you're not like burning through heals in Conqueror, there's no reason to play it. I mean, I really just I don't think there's really even like an argument to that. I mean, if you want to just AFK HE spam, like I'm telling you, the Montana is like basically as good at just HE spamming. The Rhode Island, I think, is like arguably just better at HE spamming. Like it has more effective, consistent damage output because of the crazy dispersion that it has, and then it has only like 5%, maybe 10% worse HE DPM, right? So the fact that like in the Rhode Island you basically hit 3 out of 4 shells as opposed to half in the conch, um, it like to me is it basically is just a better mid-range HE spammer. Montana I would say is just as good. Mecklenburg I would say is just as good at HE spamming as conch. Right? It is the healing. Uh, Trying to get in people's faces in this thing, trying to make them, convince them to shoot at us. And listen, people are also, because the average player in this game is a damage farming cringe lord, they're kind of very incentivized to shoot you anyway because, like, which is really pathetic, but, like, I mean, you think of it this way, right? If you've got 2 battleships to shoot at, and they both have their damage control available, right? And one's a Montana and one's a Conqueror, and you get a fire or a double fire on one of them, it's like the odds that the Conqueror is going to put your fire out is probably 0 because he shouldn't, right? Like, there's basically no point to ever damage conning even a double fire, right? I won't even damage con a single flood most of the time in this thing. I'd say like a flood and a fire or a triple fire, I will damage control that. But generally speaking, I'm like pretty much never touching the damage con key. Because there's just no point to. You have so much fucking healing, right? I mean, if we get 2 kills, we get an extra heal via the Cunningham buff, right? And then if we tank 2 million, we get an extra heal. So you could have a 6 heal spec Conqueror, and each heal is 48,000 damage, right? So we're healing like over 250,000 damage, which means we can receive over 300,000 damage and theoretically live. Like the idea that you would just heal these fires, and this is why I think like Furious is kind of like the play on the Conqueror, because it's pretty much like the one battleship you don't give a fuck about fire prevention on. I would argue that Vincent, you actually don't, while a Furious build on that thing could definitely work. And there you see there, Citadeling an ultralight cruiser, the Minotaur. While a Furious build definitely can work on the Vincent, because of the heal cooldown being significantly longer, an extra 20 seconds, there are actually definitely situations in the Vincent where you can just kind of die to fires, and I just don't know if I've ever died to fires in Conqueror, like, because I mean the heal is back just so fast. I mean, we're only at 300,000 potential, like 74-second heals, right, with the spec we're running. So we tanked, like you saw in the earlier replay, we tanked to 2 million potential, and our heals are back in like 1 minute, which is fucking just insane. Another thing about the Conqueror, we always, we often talk about power creep. That hurts, right? 21,000 damage from a Columbo ledge mod no skill boat, as we witnessed when I was playing Columbo in that review. But we can heal 16,000 of that hit back, right? That hit is a nightmare in a normal battleship, right? Because if he does that like 2 times to your Montana, you've permanently lost like a third of your ship, right? If he does that 2 times to your Conqueror, you've permanently lost like 10%, like 15% of your ship, right? So you just don't really fucking care because you can heal 3 out of 4 pen damage done to you, right? Something like this Nevsky farming me, it's like, it's good. Like, I want this. I want him to light me on fire. It's just going to let me reload faster, right? And I just, this is like, well, and Devastation, I guess. But when it comes to tier 10 battleships, I really do think Conqueror is like the only one that I consider the Furious no fire prevention build basically objectively correct, because I just don't see any reason to not run it. Like, I legitimately don't see a reason to not. You're just never gonna die in this thing. Like, the only way you're gonna die in the Conqueror is if you push in like voluntarily against 4 or 5 ships, or you just get like fucking god racked by a destroyer, right? We're on a double fire, we're on low HP. Why would I repair this? Why would I repair this? It's who gives a fuck? When this heal is over, I'm gonna wait a little bit of time, right? We've tanked 1 million potential, 70-second heals, right? 70 seconds after this fucking heal ends, I'm gonna have another one. okay, if this Nevsky somehow starts like a quadruple fire on me, yeah, I'll probably use the damage con. But like, this is kind of like the one reason I still play Conqueror, and it's just so chill. It is so chill, man. Like, you are never in danger in this thing, really ever. And I would posit a question, which is, if you could play, Furious, like you think about playing like Furious Reload Mod Conqueror, right? Uh, you have more HEDPM. Now, again, we're going to stress GK accuracy basically means that you're not super accurate, right? You're nowhere near as accurate as a cruiser, right? Something like a Hindenburg is going to hit, 8 or 9 shells out of 12 on average. You hit, 5 to 7 on average. I get that. But, like, it's just, like, inarguably somewhat challenging to justify playing a no utility cruiser when you could just, like, play the Conqueror. I mean, I don't really like know what the reason would be to play a cruiser with no utility over. I mean, I still do, right? I love the Hindenburg, and like, yeah, if you're in optimum positions, the something like a Hindenburg pumps out more damage. We're not trying to say, Conqueror does not. I want to be clear. Conqueror does not. We talked about it being on par with some other HE spamming battleships, but it doesn't pump out damage the way that a good HE spamming cruiser does. What it does, though, is it pumps out almost as good damage as a non utility cruiser, but it can't fucking die. That's the difference, right? It cannot fucking die. Uh, I mean, Hindenburg 1v1 against Colombo on half HP, you die 100 out of 100 times, right? Against any battleship. There is basically no battleship in the game on 47,000 health that at this range, assuming he was equally as skilled as I am, that like a Hindenburg, a Henry, any of these ships could kill, right? They would just get shit on. Because that's kind of what battleships do at this kind of range, is they shit on cruisers, right? And even a lot of battleships pretty much can't 1v1 Colombo. Like, I would say probably the only battleship here that really can 1v1 this thing in this situation on these comparable HP pools probably is Conqueror or Vincent. That's probably it. Conqueror actually may be a bit better because Vincent has the overmatchable nose to Colombo. But we're trying to go, like, almost perfectly nose in. But, I mean, like we talked about, like, there's just no such thing as angling the sap. Like, it's just basically not a thing. There's too many profiles on your ship that are more than, like, 15 degrees, which basically guarantees he gets full pens. But this thing is just such a fucking cockroach, dude. I mean, we're almost dead, right? The heal's coming back pretty soon. I mean, the game's over, right? The game is, of course, completely over. But he's got to kill me right now, and he doesn't kill me. So now I print back 48,000 fucking HP, right? And I mean, the game's not winnable, but this is what I mean by this is how you get battle impact in the Conqueror, is like you totally nullify the damage output of multiple people, and they basically get nothing for it, right? I mean, the game's over, so there's no reason for that guy not to commit on me, but like, he's not really getting anything out of any of that damage he did to me because I am right now on higher HP than I started that fight with, right? And that's the true gimmick of the Conk. I really do like believe that. I mean, the accuracy is just not like good enough to let you make use of this crazy fire starting theoretically Alpha Strike HE theoretically, right? These are all theoretical numbers on Conk. And they just kind of aren't like borne out by the actual ability of the ship. Like this Minotaur is annihilating us, right? But like, it's a Conqueror. I mean, we're gonna heal back again. Like, this guy's AP penning us. We just start to print half the ship again. Oh, good, he got a fire, so I can reload and kill him faster, right? I mean, it's just mad, dude. It's just fucking mad. And here, if I don't die to Torps, I would 100%, actually, I think I dodged these, but I died to the carrier Torps. But yeah, not, living the carrier Torps or the Colombo Salvo, I'd probably kill the Minutes. But the thing is just such a fucking cockroach. Such a cockroach. And a capable, damage farmer. And Pretty much the main thing that I don't super enjoy about Conqueror um, is just like it is a damage farmer. You're kind of relegated to damage farming. And then I try, like you said, like I try every chance I can to push in super deep against people in this thing because I firmly believe that that is its true value it brings to your team is not the damage farming. Like I'm telling you right now, with the kind of game that this was, right, the kind of ships that I fought, like you can get this damage in any battleship. I mean, probably, honestly, way more. Like a lot of those situations, right? Like that Minotaur when we had him flat broadside, that's a dev strike in Montana, right? When we had that Des Moines flat broadside, that's a dev strike in Montana, right? When we took that shot on the Daring, we hit 4 shells for like 7K. We would hit 8 or 9 in something like a Montana at that range, probably, right? Yeah, that's kind of my point. Is like there's nothing like super special about the damage output of Conqueror. There just isn't, and you shouldn't go down this line and play Conqueror if your sole goal is damage farming. Like honestly, I think something like Legmont Colombo literally can farm damage better than this fucking thing. I think Mecklenburg, Rhode Island, HE spamming Montana can farm damage every bit as well, if not better than this thing. Um, it's really that healing that is special. It basically totally compensates for having what is kind of like a top 3 worst battleship hull in the game at tier 10. It's horrifically bad, right? It's as bad as the Republic hull, but worse because the Citadel's exposed, right? You can get Citadel in this thing. So you have every weakness of like a Bourgogne Republic hull, but then you have every weakness of like a fucking basically like a tier 8 or 9 battleship where you have a well above water exposed Citadel. Um, but the kind of the goal is this thing is just like tanking, and there you go, 303,000 damage received. That's the goal, baby. That is the goal, is to make this number as high as humanly possible. Because I mean, you think about how much damage, like this is an absurd amount of damage to farm off of one ship. I mean, you consider the average tier 10 game, each team starts with about 700,000 HP. So like this is basically like 40% of an entire team's HP pool, obviously not counting for heals. But and it's just like you do damage back that's not as healable, right? And that's the thing. Like damage received. Their Columbo did 94,000 damage to me with Sap. We did 98,000 damage to him. But here's the thing. I was able to heal of his, because it was all sap damage, right? Of that 93k, I was able to heal like what, 65, like 70,000 of it. Of the damage I did to him, he was able to heal like probably 50,000 of it. So he dies, right? That's the gimmick. The gimmick is not damage output. Yeah, it pumps out damage well, but that's not the real gimmick. The real gimmick is, I think, the healing. Alrighty, we are going to start with equipment, and this is where things are going to start getting a little silly goofy. There's a few slots that aren't silly goofy. Objectively correct, objectively correct, objectively correct overall. I mean, objectively correct, let's be real. You run this on any ship that can have 15-second base DCP, I think. This is where we're starting to get a little silly in slot 5. And we are running Ship Consumables Mod 1, which is adding a solid 4,000 HP per heal to us, and is adding about 2 seconds of DCP time. Like I said ad nauseum during the replays, the point of this ship is never dying while getting shot at. Like, that's, like, okay, we're not going to repeat ourselves again. We're just building into the concept. To me, the concept of Conqueror is tanking through, receiving 300k damage a game. That's why I play it when I play it. I don't see any reason to go full conceal and play like a bitch in this thing. I really don't. Captain wise, it's pretty much a standard tank build. The only thing that's different here is we are swapping fire prevention for Furious, which I'm going to go so far as to say that on Conqueror, because it shoots 95% HE only and can never die to fires, it's kind of like objectively better. Like, I think this choice is just like, there's no reason to not do this on this specific ship. Improved repair party readiness, you could debate the merits of this. However, really what this comes down to is what else would you throw onto Conqueror? I don't see any value in Brisk because this is a ship where you're spamming on cooldown 24/7. The one change that I would make is I could actually see a world where you swap improved repair party readiness for AA defense. Um, but you tank 2 million, and like you saw, you get 60-second reloads on 48k heals. It's demented. You absolutely need Grease the Gears on this ship. This is with Grease the Gears 43.1, and keep in mind, this is on a 26.5-second reload. You definitely want Shell Feeder because, yes, you will swap to the AP. Occasionally, you will swap to the AP, and you will want to have it at a shorter swap time. So I think, like, this is kind of the, at least this is the objectively correct build. You could run no conceal at all and build into something like, you know, AA defense and fire prevention and drop these two if you want. This is just kind of overall how I play it. Also, this build works kind of like okay. I don't think this is an optimum build, but it kind of works with Vincent. It kind of works with Incomp, right? So it's not like the end of the world when I load up this build into my Incomp. So kind of maybe a little bit influencing that. To make my concept of bad concealment, always getting shot at, tanking everything, even more extreme, then undeniably you could drop like concealment expert for fire prevention, and then you're like, here's the thing though, like you have to realize that we're not taking concealment, and we have 13-7. Like this is better, guys. By OG World of Warships standards, like Montana, Original Vermont, Yamato, GK, Repub, this is good concealment. Do you realize that there was a time where 13.7 km conceal was considered pretty fucking good? Jesus, the power creep in this fucking game. So like 13.7 is whatever. It's fine. I don't even notice the bad concealment, the quote unquote bad concealment that still like would have been best in class 6 years ago, basically. And then the armor, it's like, you know, think of a Republic hull, right, where you're covered in 32 everywhere. The superstructure is not enormous, but really what it is it's this Citadel design from a bygone era, where this Citadel is about a third the height out of the water. It's 406, but it's perfectly flat, basically. You take more Citadels in Conk when you go flat than, like, almost every battleship in the game at tier 10. So, yeah, that's the armor. That's the Conqueror as a whole. Would I grind out the Conqueror line? To me, my problem with the Conqueror line is I recognize what's good about it. I recognize that it's a cockroach that can basically never die. Again, when played in semi-intelligently, aka not hitting torps, not taking citadels, still probably is the tankiest ship in the game. Well, aside from Devastation. But here's the thing, right? Like, you could play Conqueror at tier 10, or you could play Devastation at tier 11, and Devastation is just, like, so noticeably better than Conqueror. That, like, to me, if I want this playstyle, then I can just get the extra super premium deluxe retarded version of it with the Devastation, which is not necessarily true of all super BBs, right? So there is that. Also, if I want to HE spam, I definitely will just play Rhode Island. Like, if I just want to HE spam the fuck out of people, I'm playing Rhode Island personally. So really, to me, it's just like this absorbing damage like a sponge and tanking while putting out decent damage. I don't think it's like that interesting. I think that's my gripe with Conk. I don't think it's interesting. Like, I think this is a solid in randoms. Like, the weird tank build, like, it's got decent game impact. I think it's like at least a solid B tier battleship in randoms still. It's pretty decent. I mean, like, I would 100%, you know, if I wiped my account and I was on a quest to get all the tier 10 battleships, it's like I would definitely get it before Repub or maybe even some of these other ones, but I don't know. To me, the uniqueness of this thing, which is the 75% pen repair while HE spamming respectable damage, is not really a combination of gimmicks that I personally find like super interesting, right? I kind of put Conqueror in my list of ships. Like, I mean, you looking at all these battleships that you see here, it's like I'm playing the vast majority of them over Conqueror. Really, I mean, I'm playing Preußen honestly over Conqueror, because Preußen actually is semi-unique in the fact that it basically gets like Republic's gimmick on a good hull, right? Uh, yeah. It's still like a very capable ship. It still farms very consistent damage. I played 5 games in this session. I think we had 3 wins, 2 losses, and we're looking at games 4 and 5, which were a win and a loss. But in those 5 games, I did have about 930,000 damage, so a little under 200k average. Um, and I would say like Conqueror is still one of the highest average. Like I would probably say of the tier 10 tech tree battleships, probably Conqueror and Colombo are, I would say, overall the highest averaging damage ships in the tech tree still. But to me, the Colombo is way more satisfying because getting those just enormous chunks of pen, and it's more game impactful, right? Because you imagine that every 26 seconds, your Conqueror is probably getting like 9k in a fire for a grand total of like 16 to 18k if the fire burns. And then every 35 seconds, your Colombo is getting like 20 to 30k of pen damage. So I would say the damage farming Conqueror Colombo, I would say, yeah, in a unicorn situation where like a ton of BBs are pushing you, Conqueror can farm more because of the fires, but Colombo farms almost as well with meaningful impact. The ship is more interesting to me. You have the smoke. There's a lot more interesting dynamics going on. They're both DPM ships, right? They're both kind of the only 2 ships in the tech tree that are DPM. Like Conqueror and Colombo are basically pure DPM battleships because they typically just spam a non-AP ammo type on cooldown 90% of the time, right? So if I'm gonna have a DPM battleship, like to me it's Colombo. Like to me, Conqueror is like maybe a B tier random battleship. Colombo is like one of the very few S tier battleships in the game for randoms. Colombo might be the only tech tree battleship in the game that is S tier in randoms. Might be Colombo and Vermont. Conqueror is like nowhere near as good to me. Um, because like the reality is, right, you see how artificially I'm cramming this playstyle in, right? We can talk about the playstyle. I'm talking about how I play no concealment, right? I play these 48k HP heals, right? I build the whole ship around what to me is the point, which is playing medium range and soaking up damage for your team. But like, there's games where you can't do that, or there's no value in doing that. There's games where nobody shoots you really. There's games where like DD's getting your spawn and torpedo out anyway. So like in the average game, you know what I mean? Like yeah, in a game that lasts 20 minutes where you're playing central positioning with this weird tank spec Conqueror build that I run, like you can get massive game impact. But the reality is most games are blowouts or they last 10 minutes, and like in a 10-minute game where you're not burning through Conqueror heals, it's like, yeah, most other battleships just accomplish more. You know, a cruiser goes flat to like a Des Moines going flat to Colombo at 20 kilometers. Like you're gonna fucking dev strike the thing, and like Conqueror, you're probably not because it's less accurate. And in theory, like people make such a big deal about the short fuse AP. I mentioned this briefly during the replays, but I think it's just such a AP ammo is so misunderstood by the community. I think like the amount of situations where short fuse armor piercing battleship ammo is preventing an overpen and causing a citadel, dude, that shit just like basically never happens. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. There's way more situations in this game where short fuse armor piercing cucks you instead of helping you. Way more. Anytime you hit water first, it's fucking you. Anytime you're hitting ships with spaced armor, it's fucking you. Anytime you're hitting a cruiser at anything approaching beyond nut hair range, it's not helping you. It's just a whatever, right? I mean, like, even slim cruisers, it's like, the cruisers that are so slim that you overpen them at every range, like, the short fuse AP on Conqueror is not really doing anything for you anyway. Typically speaking, the only way you sit it like a GNAN at 8, like a GNAN at 3 kilometers. Like, I hate to fucking break it to you, buddy, but a GNAN at 8 kilometers, like, short fuse AP isn't helping you Citadel that thing. You're gonna Citadel in a Montana by shooting water first, right? You have to hit the water first. The thing is so fucking slim that at nut hair range, even a Conqueror is gonna overpen it if it just shoots it straight on the belt. Um, Really, the short fuse AP is working for you at like unicorn ranges, right? Like there's certain ranges, maybe like the 10-ish kilometer range, where like some medium thickness cruisers they take like an overpen from Montana, you Citadel them. But like all in all, I firmly believe overall short fuse AP is not good. This is just kind of a tangent. I don't know why like people think it's good. There's so few situations that can occur in the game where it will help you. And I would say the majority of situations, it either has zero effect on your damage output, or it straight up just doesn't help you at all, or it straight up hinders you. Yeah, that's gonna do it for the Yap session on the Conch. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you for, I guess, Ohio or Slava in the next one. Have a good one.